important is it for all dancers to train in multiple genres as well as voice and acting? And that's a great question. The reason why I picked this is because I think this is one that a lot of parents question about how much time and money and focus is being spent on a child's training. I'm of a firm believer that knowledge is power, right? To know a little bit more than the person next to you may be able to give you more opportunities. I remember when Debbie Allen used to do the Academy Awards. Her auditions were literally 4 to 5 different combinations, depending on the type of movie, would depend on the type of quality of movement. So at one point there were aerialists, there are ballet dancers, sometimes there's a little bit of stunt work mixed in with fencing, mixed in with waltzing, mixed in with hip hop, tap. So when you walked in, she threw basically every type of Bollywood, flamenco. I mean, it was everything under the sun. If you were not proficient enough, not to say that you needed to be an expert, but if you were so lost because you did not know the basics, or at least have a sensibility of the culture or the idea behind the movement, you were cut right away. And here's an amazing opportunity to perform in multiple numbers on national TV that's actually spread across the world, right? And it goes away just like that because the dancer just wasn't prepared enough. So I do believe that the basics, ballet, jazz, tap, and hip hop, are by far the 4 basics that all dancers should have under their tool belt. Now, if they get to a point where they want to add a little bit more ballroom, or they want to add something cultural, again, like Bollywood or flamenco, or even salsa, tango, there's so many forms of dance out there that it allows you not just to learn something new, but it actually expands your vocabulary, your movement vocabulary, which can inspire and evoke a much more unique freestyle, which again can be very eye-catching in any audition. So again, you don't want to miss out on the opportunities when they do present themselves. Now, when we're talking about voice and acting, that's got to definitely be something that the dancer can see the use behind it. So if you are planning on doing musical theater, dinner theater, even cruise ships for that matter, then yes, voice and acting are 2 extra quality skill sets that can actually make a big difference for that last moment of decision for that choreographer, casting director, producer to say yes or no to you in that moment. I know a lot of dancers that have actually then evolved themselves into the world of acting. So to be able to have a little bit of that in your arsenal is not a bad thing. Not to mention, if you are planning on doing commercials, then in the world of commercials, acting is absolutely necessary. And when you do get a chance to book national commercials that are unionized, right? They're under a union contract, you can make a boatload of money. It's quite amazing. So yes, the idea of being able to train in multiple genres, I think, is quite valuable. As long as you have the basics under your belt, and basics meaning something that you really build properly over time, not something that you just take a few lessons here for a couple of years and then let it go. It's something that you kind of keep in maintenance because every style or genre is constantly evolving. So you never want to lose touch with what's going on pop culture, on the beat of music. You don't want to miss out on that. So if there's a way to be able to maintain a schedule that can promote that, then that to me is an absolute yes. Now, with that said, I'm going to just mention one last thing. Be careful not to spread your dancer too thin. And when I say multiple genres, let them get used to some ballet, put some ballet under their belt, and add in jazz and a tap and a hip hop. And then maybe we loosen up a little bit of the ballet and we put a little bit more focus on the jazz. And again, tap, hip hop. And then we manage it again, and then we put a little bit more focus on the hip hop, maybe not so much on the just to make sure that there's a balance. Because if these kids are just doing one ballet class, one tap class, one hip hop class, one jazz class, right? Not even mentioning the idea of contemporary / lyrical or musical theater, right? If it's just one of those per week, the growth rate of that dancer may be slower. They'll eventually get somewhere for sure. But it's the fact that in that 1 hour of information, that's only 1 hour. And then they go through an entire 7 days, 24 hours a day, until we come back to that same genre to work on it again for only 1 hour. And this is why being able to balance substance and balance a schedule that makes sense to the growth of their training is really essential. And the best people to really talk about these things with will forever be those teachers. And I'll tell you why. Because they are constantly with your kids every single day. They're the ones that are in the trenches. So they see their good days. They see their bad days. They see their productive days. They see their lazy days. They see it all. We, on the other hand, when you're talking about convention teachers, choreographers that go on the road and we get them for just a weekend, which version do you think we're really going to get? We're always going to get their like hyped up, yes, and it's like a charge of like this electricity that's shooting through their bodies, right? And there's such an excitement that's so different because the environment is different than the one at the studio. But what's interesting is that the one at the studio is the one that actually builds them into the super productive, effective dancer for the future. Conventions and competitions are needed, they're valuable, but they're really good for a boost. They're great to supercharge a moment, but they're not there for the longevity, which could lead me to a whole different conversation, but I want to keep going. So, does that make sense to everybody? Do me a favor and raise your hands if that was helpful for you. Somehow I'm not getting any hands on my screen.
I can see a bunch of hands, Liz.
Thank you, Tia. Mine is,
Yeah, absolutely.
I can't see myself again. And
Well, you look great.
I feel so disconnected. Okay, Tia, so do me a favor. If that's the case, just come back in and pop in on the audio so I know that it's relatable.
Cool. You got it.
Thank you so much, sweetheart. All right. So now that that makes sense, I would like to move on to the second question, still pertaining around training. This is the question. Last weekend, my daughter, who is 13, attended a convention. She had just moved up to the teen room, which was at the time combined with teens and seniors. So as a parent observer, it was my first time to watch senior dancers at convention. What I saw was amazing. A lot of the serious seniors danced with total abandon. It was beautiful to watch. They danced big, full out, and they didn't even give a hoot if it was perfect. And they didn't give a hoot to who was watching. I love, whoever wrote this was fantastic. I love the writing. As a parent coming from the junior room, I was really impressed. My question is this: how do I get my dancer, who is very safe, very technical, to that level? Is it maturity? Is it experience? Because I keep hearing my daughter's choreographers tell her not to dance so pretty and perfect and to encourage her to take more risks. So how can I help my daughter to grow and to dance with total abandon? This is a great question, and I'm pretty sure this is quite relevant to many, many parents that are out there, because performance and the leap of faith from a performer's point of view is an emotional leap. It's not just a physical one. So, for example, again, for those of you who have never really had the experience of being on a stage, and then on a stage where someone is asking you to be emotionally vulnerable, that means being transparent. Let people see through you so they can see inside of you. That's a very scary concept to many kids who at an age, and in this situation, she's 13, where there's already so much emphasis of body change already happening. She's getting taller, her chest is shifting, her hips are molding into a different mold, and they're getting taller. And coming from the junior room, right, when they're juniors, and all you're used to is this little bit of a spitfire and this energy that is excited to be there, but looking to be so, so perfect. And now everything is, moving in different directions. They start to notice that everybody's watching them. And this is where it gets interesting for the dancer, because they've picked an outlet in their lives that puts them on a stage where people are meant to see them. But then at the same time, they're also like, no, don't watch me, don't watch my boobs, don't watch my hips, don't watch this. And they become so self-conscious. And so this is the tug of war that's happening inside their head, because they so want to emotionally know what it means to express. But on the flip side, they're like, but I don't want anybody to ever tell me that I don't look good. There's no easy answer to this. So to answer, is maturity a part of it? Absolutely. Because they have to start learning to be okay with their physicality. They have to learn to embrace the newness, this change, this shift of body. Because once they start to learn to take ownership of their limbs, of their bodies, to know what they possess is beautiful, not to the world, but to themselves. Suddenly, the care of trying to be perfect kind of just starts to dissipate, because perfect is definitely an ingrained notion that most children hear from a very, very young age. Whether you're really telling them or not, society is telling these kids that perfection is the way to go. You see someone like the younger Jenner sisters, who is constantly doing lip challenge. She's getting her lips done, and suddenly everybody wants to do a lip challenge. There's so many external influences that are telling these kids what's beautiful, what's not beautiful, what's perfect, what's not perfect. And if you're not this, you're definitely not going to be that. And it has sometimes nothing to do with you, the parent. And that's what's so frustrating on your end, because there's no way for you to be able to control the outside world. No one can. But what we can do is help these kids understand how to control their thoughts, how to be able to learn to appreciate their beauty, their true beauty, the one that's on the inside, not just the one that's on the outside. Look, as you can tell, right, I am not the skinny mini. And quite frankly, I don't know if I ever really was. And weight was always a challenge. And someone who wanted to be a ballerina and whose body frame was like every other young girl, you're basically built like a boy. There's nothing, everything's flat, same body build, pretty much. And when puberty kicked in, and every ballet company that I kept auditioning to come back to their summer programs kept telling me the same thing. Well, you no longer have a ballet body. We're so sorry. We love your dancing, but you're just not that ballerina. And when you're being told, director after director after director, the same thing, and all you've been doing is building up your entire world to become a prima ballerina. That's all I ever wanted to be. I wanted to be my mom's mentor, Alicia Alonso. I wanted to be the prima ballerina. I didn't want to be in the court. I wanted to be her. And so that was my goal. So everything was focused through that idea. But when my walls of my reality, my mental reality kept crashing down, the further I was spiraling down. And my mother saw it, because for 2 weeks, I refused to go back to the studio. I was devastated. I was in tears. And I didn't know how to get past that. my mom, who I will always forever keep talking about to you, was very smart in helping me not just understand that dance isn't an external expression, but it's the internal one that matters most. And I remember she came into my room and I was just like literally moping on my bed, as I did now for 2 weeks, and she was getting tired of it. She was tired of me feeling sorry for myself. And she's like, Liz, I want to take you somewhere. And of course, my pouty self was like, is it a dance class? And my mom said, yes, it is. She's like, I promise you, it's different from what you know, but I really believe you're going to really like it. It's not ballet now, is it? I got so bitter and jaded so quickly. I was like, no, it's not ballet. Okay, I'll go. I mean, at this point, I didn't have anything to lose. My heart was already broken. I had cried enough tears. And my mom took me into the studio. And we stood right in the doorway. Because again, we didn't have observation windows or cameras to be able to see from the lobby point of view. And what I saw was spectacular. Because what I saw were these dancers, tall, short, old, young, male, female, big chested, no chest at all, big hips, no hips at all, a little bit of everything. And then suddenly you heard the guitarist strum. And there was this singer whose voice would just make the hair on the back of your neck stand up. And suddenly you hear the rhythm coming from their hands, and then the rhythm coming from their feet, and suddenly their faces, it was like everybody had been contorted from the inside out. It was the most breathtaking thing I've ever witnessed. And I remember looking at that moment going, oh my God, they're dancing the way that I feel on the inside. And as I'm looking at the class, and my body was shaking, tears were coming down my face, and my mother could see that I was having this visceral reaction. When the class was done, she looked at me, she's like, so what do you think? I don't know what I have to do, but I have to do that. I have to do that. And in an instant, not only did I realize that I had been trapping my own self in this little box of the idea that unless I had the right body type, that I was going to be a dancer of anything, and that I didn't have to stay confined, and that there were dancers out there that had so much dynamic. After a while, that's what made it so beautiful, is that you didn't even care what they looked like, because their soul and their passion radiated so much that it was irrelevant what else was going on, to a degree, because it was humanity, it was emotion, it was raw, and it was beautiful. Now, granted, it took me a second to develop that out of me, because I was still somewhat emotionally scarred, but not scarred by anyone's fault, but scarred because I allowed myself to become scarred. I didn't know any different, which meant I didn't know any better. And this is where I'm so thankful that my mom exposed me to another art form that not only was going to transform me, it really saved me. Because if I didn't have dance in my life, I didn't know what I was going to do moving forward. If I couldn't be a ballerina, then what else could I be? And it just really showed me that dance, there's no expiration to the learning of dance. That there's no end game to when it comes to being inspired and just diving into something entirely different and new. Ballet and flamenco are like this. They're like on two sides of the room, two opposite sides. They don't fall in alignment other than the fact of frame, strength, resistance, but ballet is lifted and elegant amongst all that strength and very poised. Flamenco, everything is grounded and heavy and emotional and bold and externalized. And quite frankly, I really made so many self-discoveries in those moments. So when you're talking about your child, right, growing, is it maturity? Absolutely. Because we have to give these kids a chance to catch up to life. And if dance is meant to be a reflection of life, then how much of it have they really lived to be able to share to the audience? You know, it's always fascinating to see dancers that can show a level of emotional maturity at a young age, and that's not necessarily everyone. There aren't that many. It's sort of like when you watch the actors on the Disney Channel, right? And then you see someone like the young kid from The Sixth Sense. Haley Osment, I believe was his name. Because you saw this little boy who he wasn't acting, and there was such a maturity and a clarity to his being on camera that you're looking at this kid going, this can't be a kid. There's no way. But you can't compare that level of maturity, and you can't quite find it in every kid because not everybody's born that way. And that's fine. For some, it's a growth, it's a discovery every day growing into it. And that's why sometimes I think parents get a little confused, because you do see some kids that share and show all this emotional maturity, and then there are some where you can't see them, you don't see it. Hold on. Sorry, I'm just getting some text onto my phone that will not stop. Either that or I'm getting something off my webinar. But something keeps ringing and I can't make it stop. Okay. Okay. Somebody's just basically accepting all my go-to webinars. Stop it. Accept later. All right. So be patient. As they grow up, trust me when I say you'll start to see a little bit more coming from your dancer. It is quite shocking coming from the junior room into the teen senior room. But it's no different, quite frankly, than a senior dancer that steps into their very first professional audition. It is really eye-opening and quite intimidating. And if they're not used to it, there's always going to be a little bit of a pullback, emotional pullback. Not because they don't want to, but because the experience is so new. Then in about 6 months, 7 months, 8 months down the road, a year, 2 years, trust me, you don't see that same dancer anymore. So this is just a matter of time that just takes a second to grow into. But trust me, she's fine. She's doing great. You're doing fine. You're doing great. So